The notification sound from my phone cut through the laughter echoing across my aunt's sprawling backyard in Westchester. I glanced down at the screen, trying to keep my expression neutral as I read the message that would change everything. Ms. Rodriguez, this is David Chen from Amazon Strategic Acquisitions. We'd like to discuss purchasing your platform. When can we schedule a call? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I slipped the phone back into my blazer pocket without a word. Around me, the annual Martinez family reunion was in full swing. 3 generations gathered around picnic tables laden with tamales, enchiladas, and enough gossip to fuel a telenovela. And at the center of it all sat my father, Roberto Martinez, holding court like the successful contractor he was, regaling everyone with stories about his latest commercial projects. Speaking of business, my cousin Danny called out from across the patio, his voice carrying that familiar edge of condescension. "How's that little computer thing going, Elena?" The conversations died down as all eyes turned to me. I felt the familiar knot form in my stomach, the same one that had been there since I was 12 and announced I wanted to be a programmer instead of following my mother into teaching. The same knot that tightened every time my family gathered and I became the cautionary tale, the dreamer who refused to get serious about life. "It's going well," I said simply, taking a sip of my horchata to buy myself time. My father chuckled, the sound mixing affection with disappointment in a way only he could master. "Maija, you've been saying that for 3 years now. When are you going to get a real job? Danny here just got promoted to district manager at the bank." Danny beamed, straightening his tie despite the casual setting. "Starting salary is $85,000, plus benefits, and I'm only 28. "That's wonderful, Danny," my mother, Carmen, said with genuine pride. Then she turned to me with that look, the one that said she loved me but worried I was wasting my life. "Elena, you're so smart, so capable. You could do anything you set your mind to. This online thing, it's not stable, am I, amor?" If only they knew. If only they could see beyond their narrow definition of success to understand what I'd actually built. But how could I explain that my little computer thing was actually a revolutionary e-commerce platform that had just caught the attention of the world's largest retailer? How could I tell them that the daughter they saw as the family disappointment had created something that Amazon wanted to acquire for 8 figures? Haas platform, I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I knew for certain this was real. The truth was, I'd been building something extraordinary right under their noses for the past 3 years. While they saw me as the girl who dropped out of her master's program to play with computers, I'd been developing an AI-powered platform that helped small businesses optimize their online sales across multiple channels. What started as a solution to help my friend Maya's jewelry business had evolved into something much bigger. A comprehensive system that could predict customer behavior, manage inventory, and automate marketing campaigns with unprecedented accuracy. But my family had never understood technology. To them, real work meant physical labor, tangible results, something you could point to and say, "I built that." My father's construction company had been in the family for 2 generations. He'd built shopping centers, office buildings, and residential developments across New York. When he talked about his work, people could drive by and see his legacy in brick and mortar. My work lived in the cloud, in algorithms and data streams that were invisible to them. To my family, invisible meant imaginary. "Elena," my Uncle Miguel said, leaning forward with the kind of serious expression he usually reserved for discussing property taxes. "You're 31 now. You need to think about your future. About stability. About family. How are you going to support yourself? Support a family someday?" I wanted to laugh. If only he knew that my little online business had generated more revenue in the past year than his entire landscaping company had in the last 5. But I'd learned long ago that defending myself only made them more convinced I was delusional. "I'm doing fine, Tio," I said, managing to keep my voice steady. "But for how long?" my Aunt Rosa chimed in. "These internet things, they come and go. Remember when everyone was talking about that MySpace? Now look at it." "That's different," I started, but my father cut me off. "Rosa's right, Elena. Technology changes too fast. One day you're on top, the next day something new comes along and you're finished. Construction, banking, teaching, these are careers that last. People will always need buildings, they'll always need schools, they'll always need banks. I bit back the urge to point out that Amazon had pretty much revolutionized retail, that Netflix had killed video stores, that Uber had transformed transportation. Instead, I nodded and took another sip of my drink. The conversation moved on, as it always did, to safer topics. Danny's promotion, my cousin Sophia's wedding plans, my brother Carlos's latest soccer coaching achievements. I sat there, surrounded by the people I loved most in the world, feeling more isolated than ever. Fahimi, why? This was my family. The same people who had cheered when I graduated valedictorian from high school, who had celebrated when I got into Columbia on a full scholarship, who had supported me through my undergraduate years when I was the first in our family to earn a computer science degree. But somewhere along the way, when I'd chosen to forge my own path instead of following the traditional route, their pride had turned to concern, then to disappointment, and finally to this gentle mockery disguised as loving concern. They didn't understand that I'd found my calling in those late nights hunched over my laptop, debugging code and designing user interfaces. They couldn't see the elegance in a perfectly optimized algorithm, or the satisfaction of solving complex problems that could impact thousands of small businesses. To them, success looked like a corner office, a steady paycheck, and a clear career ladder to climb. My phone buzzed again. Another message from David Chen. This is time-sensitive. We're prepared to make a substantial offer. Please respond at your earliest convenience. I glanced around the patio at my family, my father gesturing animatedly as he described his latest project, my mother laughing at something my aunt had said, my cousins planning their next weekend adventures. They had no idea that their failure of a daughter had just received the kind of opportunity that could change everything. But I'd learned to keep my victories small and quiet. The first time I'd hit 6 figures in revenue, I'd tried to share the news. My father had patted my shoulder and said, "That's great, Mija, but is it sustainable?" When I had landed my first major client, a boutique chain with 50 locations, my mother had worried about all that pressure and suggested I consider teaching instead. So I'd stopped sharing. I'd kept my successes to myself, quietly building something extraordinary, while they continued to see me as the dreamer who refused to grow up. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself studying their faces, memorizing this moment, because I knew that soon, very soon, everything would change. The family dynamic that had defined us for years was about to shift in ways none of us could imagine. The girl they saw as lost was about to become the one who'd found her way to the top of the mountain. And tomorrow, when I called David Chen back, I'd begin a conversation that would prove that sometimes the path everyone thinks is wrong is actually the one that leads exactly where you need to go. But for now, I just sat there, holding my secret close, watching my family laugh and talk and live in the last moments before everything changed forever. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The next morning, I sat in my cramped studio apartment in Brooklyn, staring at my laptop screen, as David Chen's email thread grew longer with each exchange. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a strange mixture of excitement and surreal disbelief. Amazon's strategic acquisitions didn't just cold email random people. They'd been watching my platform, studying my user metrics, analyzing my technology. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. But before I could fully process what this meant for my future, I needed to understand how I'd gotten here. How the girl who'd been laughed at yesterday had caught the attention of the world's most powerful tech company. It all started 4 years ago, in the most unlikely place, my friend Maya's kitchen in Astoria, Queens. Maya Goldstein had been my roommate at Columbia, a brilliant art history major who'd minored in business but never quite figured out how to bridge her creative passion with commercial success. After graduation, while I was struggling through the first year of my master's program in computer science, she was designing jewelry in her tiny apartment, creating these gorgeous pieces inspired by Art Deco architecture and vintage Hollywood glamour. Her work was exceptional, the kind of jewelry that fashion bloggers would feature and celebrities would wear to premieres. But Maya was drowning in the business side of things. She'd set up an Etsy shop, a Facebook page, an Instagram account, and even tried selling on Amazon, but she couldn't figure out how to coordinate everything. Orders would come in through different platforms at different times, inventory tracking was a nightmare, and she was spending more time managing her online presence than actually creating. I feel like I need a degree in marketing, accounting, and computer science just to sell a pair of earrings, she'd complained one evening, surrounded by spreadsheets and shipping labels. There has to be a better way. That's when it hit me. The problem wasn't unique to Maya, it was universal. Small businesses everywhere were struggling with the same challenge: how to manage multiple sales channels efficiently without getting overwhelmed by the complexity. I'd always been drawn to solving puzzles, even as a kid. While other children played with dolls or sports equipment, I was taking apart radios and building elaborate Lego constructions that followed their own internal logic. In high school, I'd taught myself basic programming languages just for fun, creating simple games and utilities that impressed my computer science teacher enough to recommend I pursue it in college. But my family had different ideas about what constituted a practical education. Computer science is fine as a hobby, my father had said when I'd first mentioned it as a potential major, but you should study something stable: teaching, nursing, business administration, something with job security. My mother had been even more direct. Misha, computers are for men. You're so good with people, so patient. You'd make a wonderful teacher. I'd compromised initially, started as a mathematics major, with the intention of becoming a high school teacher, taking computer science courses as electives. But every programming class felt like coming home. The logic, the creativity, the way code could transform abstract ideas into functioning reality. It all made perfect sense to me in a way that lesson planning and classroom management never did. By my junior year, I'd switched majors despite my parents' protests. "You're making a mistake," my father had warned. "Technology changes too fast. One day you learn one system, the next day it's obsolete." But I couldn't ignore what felt like my calling. And when I graduated with honors and got accepted into Columbia's competitive master's program, even my skeptical family had admitted I might be onto something. The master's program, though, was where I'd hit my first real wall. Not academically. I was excelling in my courses, particularly in artificial intelligence and machine learning. The problem was philosophical. My professors were brilliant theorists, focused on pushing the boundaries of what was possible in computer science. But I was increasingly interested in practical applications, in how technology could solve real-world problems for real people. The disconnect became impossible to ignore during my thesis proposal meeting. I'd wanted to develop an AI system that could help small businesses optimize their online marketing strategies. My advisor, Dr. Jonathan Hartwell, had listened politely before explaining why this wasn't academically rigorous enough for a Columbia thesis. "Elena," he'd said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "you're thinking like an entrepreneur, not a researcher. We're here to advance the field of computer science, not to create commercial applications. Anyone can build a business tool. What we need from you is original research that contributes to our understanding of artificial intelligence." I'd left that meeting feeling deflated and misunderstood. Here I was, surrounded by brilliant minds who could theorize about the future of AI, but who seemed disconnected from the immediate ways technology could improve people's lives. Meanwhile, Maya was still struggling with her jewelry business, and I knew I had the skills to help her, if only I could find the time and focus to do it properly. The breaking point came 6 months later. I was deep into research for a thesis on neural network optimization that felt increasingly abstract and meaningless to me, when Maya called in tears. She'd just lost a major wholesale order because she'd oversold inventory. Her Etsy shop had sold the last 5 pieces of a popular necklace design, while her Amazon store was simultaneously processing an order for 10 of the same pieces. The customer was furious, her reputation was damaged, and she was considering giving up on the business entirely. That night, I made a decision that would horrify my family and disappoint my professors, but that felt absolutely right to me. I was going to leave the master's program and build the solution Maya needed, and that thousands of other small business owners needed too. The conversation with my parents was even worse than I had anticipated. "You're throwing away your education," my mother had said, her voice tight with disbelief. "You're so close to finishing. Why would you quit now?" My father had been more direct. "This is the most irresponsible thing you've ever done. You think you're going to make money playing with computers? You think you're smarter than your professors?" Even my usually supportive brother Carlos had questioned my judgment. "Elena, I don't understand. You're getting a master's degree from Columbia. That's huge. Why would you walk away from that for some startup idea that might not work?" I tried to explain, but how do you communicate a vision that exists only in your head? How do you convince people that you can see a solution to a problem they don't even understand exists? "I'm not walking away from education," I'd insisted. "I'm walking toward application. I'm going to build something that actually helps people." "Helps people do what?" my father had demanded. "Sell jewelry on the internet?" "Elena, that's not a career, that's not a life." But I'd already made up my mind. I'd saved enough money from my teaching assistant position to cover rent for 6 months, and I had a clarity of purpose that I'd never felt before. I was going to build a platform that would revolutionize how small businesses manage their online presence. I started with Maya's specific needs, but as I dove deeper into the development process, I realized the possibilities were much broader. Using machine learning algorithms, I could create a system that would not only manage inventory across multiple sales channels, but would also predict customer behavior, optimize pricing strategies, and automate marketing campaigns based on real-time data analysis. The technical challenges were enormous. I was essentially trying to build what large corporations used teams of dozens of developers to create, but I was doing it alone, in my bedroom, with no budget and no safety net. There were nights when I coded until sunrise, surviving on coffee and determination, solving problems that seemed impossible one line of code at a time. Maya became my first beta tester, and within 2 months of launching the initial version, her sales had increased by 300%. Word spread quickly through her network of artist friends, and soon I had a dozen small businesses wanting to try the platform. That's when I knew I wasn't just building a tool, I was building a company. I named it Streamline Ops. And what had started as a favor for a friend had evolved into a comprehensive e-commerce management platform powered by artificial intelligence. But my family still saw it as Elena's computer hobby, the expensive mistake that was preventing me from getting a real job. The first year was the hardest. I was learning to be not just a developer, but a business owner, marketer, customer service representative, and everything else a startup required. I made mistakes, some of them costly, but each failure taught me something crucial about what small businesses actually needed. I remember the night I landed my 10th paying customer, a small organic soap company in Portland. I'd been charging just $50 a month for the platform, barely enough to cover my server costs, but seeing that payment notification felt like validation that I was onto something real. By year 2, I had 50 customers and had raised my prices to $200 per month. I hired my first employee, Jessica Park, a brilliant UX designer I'd met at a tech meetup who believed in the vision enough to work for equity and a below-market salary. Year 3 brought our first major breakthrough. A boutique clothing chain with 15 locations had signed up for our enterprise tier at $2,000 per month, and their success story attracted attention from other multi-location retailers. Suddenly, we weren't just serving individual artists and crafters. We were working with serious businesses that had serious revenue. But through it all, my family's perception never changed. At every gathering, every family dinner, every casual conversation, I was still Elena the dreamer. Elena the girl who'd thrown away her education. Elena who needed to get serious about her future. Now, as I sat in my apartment reading David Chen's emails, I realized that tomorrow's phone call with Amazon would either validate everything I'd believed about my path or prove that my family had been right all along. Either way, I was about to find out just how far a girl with a little computer hobby could actually go. The next morning, I walked into the WeWork space in Dumbo that had become Streamline Ops' unofficial headquarters. I'd upgraded from working in my bedroom 6 months ago, when our client base had grown to the point where I needed to separate my personal life from business operations. Not that there was much of a personal life to speak of. Jessica was already at her desk, surrounded by wireframe sketches and sticky notes, working on the user interface redesign that would support the new AI-powered recommendation engine I'd been developing. She looked up as I approached, immediately noticing my expression. "You look like someone who either won the lottery or received terrible news," she said, pushing her black-rimmed glasses up her nose. "Which is it?" I glanced around the open workspace, making sure we wouldn't be overheard by the cryptocurrency startup team at the next cluster of desks. Amazon wants to buy us. Jessica's coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. I'm sorry, what? Amazon Strategic Acquisitions? They want to schedule a call to discuss purchasing Streamline Ops. She set down her mug carefully, as if sudden movements might shatter the reality of what I'd just said. Elena, are you serious? Amazon? The Amazon? I nodded, pulling up David Chen's email on my phone to show her. She read it twice, then looked up at me with an expression of pure disbelief. This is insane. How did they even find us? We're not exactly on the Fortune 500 radar. That was exactly what I'd been wondering. Streamline Ops had grown steadily over the past 3 years, but we were still a relatively small operation. We had 847 active customers, paying between $200 and $2,000 per month, generating about $600,000 in annual recurring revenue. Impressive for a bootstrapped startup, but hardly the kind of numbers that typically caught Amazon's attention. I've been thinking about that, I said, settling into the chair across from her workstation. Remember that case study feature TechCrunch did on us last month? The one about AI democratizing e-commerce for small businesses? Jessica's eyes widened. The one where they called you the woman single-handedly leveling the playing field between mom-and-pop shops and major retailers? That's the one. It got picked up by several other publications, and our sign-up rate tripled for 2 weeks after it ran. But more importantly, it detailed our AI algorithms and their success rates. The TechCrunch article had been a turning point for us in more ways than one. The journalist, Sarah Kim, had spent a week following our customers and documenting the real-world impact of our platform. She'd interviewed Maya, whose jewelry business had grown from a kitchen table operation to a 6-figure company with international sales. She'd talked to Roberto Silva, who owned a chain of family restaurants and used our platform to manage online orders across 7 delivery platforms simultaneously. Most impressively, she'd featured Maria Santos, whose handmade children's clothing line had gone from local craft fairs to supplying boutiques in 12 states. The numbers were compelling. Our customers saw an average 180% increase in revenue within their first year of using Streamline Ops, and our AI-powered inventory prediction system had a 94% accuracy rate in preventing overselling, a problem that cost small businesses millions of dollars annually in lost sales and damaged reputations. But what had really caught people's attention was the technology behind it all. I developed a machine learning system that could analyze purchasing patterns across multiple sales channels, predict seasonal trends, and automatically adjust inventory levels and pricing strategies. It was the kind of sophisticated technology that major corporations spent millions developing, but I was offering it to small businesses for a fraction of that cost. Amazon must have realized we're solving the same problems they are, I continued, but for the opposite end of the market. They dominate with massive scale and resources. We're enabling small businesses to compete with that same level of sophistication. Jessica leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. So what happens now? Do we sell? Do we negotiate? Do we even want to be part of Amazon? Those were exactly the questions that had been churning in my mind since receiving David Chen's message. The startup world was full of acquisition stories, some triumphant, others cautionary tales of innovative companies that lost their soul after being absorbed by tech giants. I don't know yet, I admitted. I'm scheduled to talk with David Chen at 2 p.m. today. I figure I'll listen to what they have to say before making any decisions. What I didn't mention to Jessica was the weight of expectation I felt from my family's constant skepticism. For 3 years, I'd endured questions about when I was going to get a real job, suggestions that I should consider teaching or working for someone else's company, and the subtle but persistent implication that I was wasting my potential on a fantasy. The previous evening, after returning from the family reunion, I'd called my best friend from college, Sarah Rodriguez. No relation, despite the shared last name. Sarah had gone the traditional route: master's degree in finance, analyst position at Goldman Sachs, steady progression up the corporate ladder. She was exactly the kind of success story my family wished I'd become. Elena, this is incredible, she'd said when I told her about Amazon's interest. Do you realize what this means? This validates everything you've been working toward. I know, but I'm terrified, I'd confessed. What if it falls through? What if they're just fishing for information about our technology? What if I'm getting ahead of myself? Stop, Sarah had said firmly. You built something that Amazon wants to buy. That doesn't happen by accident. You solved a real problem in a way that nobody else has, and now the biggest tech company in the world is taking notice. That's not luck. That's vision and execution. Her words had helped, but they couldn't completely quiet the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my father. Elena, this internet business isn't sustainable. You need something solid, something reliable. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years ago, when I'd first told my family I was starting Streamline Ops, my uncle Miguel had warned me about getting too caught up in Silicon Valley dreams. He'd cited stories of dot-com crashes and startups that burned through investor money before disappearing entirely. These tech companies come and go, he'd said, but people will always need construction, always need banking, always need teachers. You should focus on something that will still be there in 20 years. Now, 20 years after Amazon had fundamentally changed how the world shops, they were interested in purchasing the company he'd dismissed as a pipe dream. The morning flew by as Jessica and I prepared for the call with David Chen. We compiled our user metrics, financial projections, and technical documentation. I wanted to be ready for any questions about our platform's capabilities, our customer base, or our growth trajectory. At 1:45 p.m., I found a quiet conference room and dialed the number David Chen had provided. He answered on the second ring. Ms. Rodriguez, thank you for making the time, he said, his voice professional but warm. I hope you don't mind, but I have 2 colleagues joining us today. Sarah Palmer from our technical due diligence team and Kevin Liu from business development. For the next hour, they walked me through Amazon's interest in Streamline Ops. It wasn't just about acquiring our customer base or eliminating a potential competitor. They were genuinely impressed by the AI technology I'd developed and how effectively it served small and medium-sized businesses. What you've built is remarkable, Sarah Palmer said. Our technical team has been analyzing your platform's performance metrics, and your inventory prediction accuracy rates are exceptional. Even more impressive is how you've made enterprise-level technology accessible to businesses that traditionally couldn't afford it. Kevin Liu jumped in with the business perspective. Amazon has always been focused on helping businesses of all sizes succeed. Your platform aligns perfectly with that mission, but you're reaching customers we struggle to serve effectively. The small business market is incredibly important to us, and Streamline Ops has proven that there's a scalable way to support their unique needs. The conversation felt surreal. These weren't just executives going through the motions of a corporate acquisition. They genuinely understood what I'd built and why it mattered. They asked detailed questions about my AI algorithms, about the specific pain points we solved for customers, and about my vision for the platform's future development. What we're proposing, David Chen said as the call began to wind down, is not just an acquisition but a partnership that would allow Streamline Ops to scale beyond what's possible as an independent company, while maintaining the focus on small business success that makes your platform special. When they mentioned the preliminary valuation range, 8 figures, more money than I'd ever imagined, I had to mute my phone for a moment to catch my breath. We'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting, David continued. Perhaps you could come to Seattle next week to meet with our team in person and see how Streamline Ops might fit within Amazon's broader ecosystem. After we hung up, I sat in the empty conference room for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. 3 years ago, I'd been a graduate school dropout with an idea and a determination to help my friend manage her jewelry business more effectively. Now, Amazon wanted to acquire the company I'd built in my bedroom. I thought about my family, still gathered at my aunt's house, probably still discussing Danny's promotion and Sophia's wedding plans. They had no idea that their irresponsible daughter had just received an acquisition offer from one of the world's most valuable companies. But more than vindication, I felt a deep sense of purpose. Streamline Ops wasn't just my company. It was a platform that had helped hundreds of small business owners achieve their dreams. Maya's jewelry was now sold in boutiques across the country. Roberto's restaurants had survived the pandemic because his online ordering system kept customers connected. Maria's children's clothing line had grown into a sustainable business that supported her family and employed 12 other people. This wasn't just about proving my family wrong or validating my career choices. This was about taking something I'd built to help people and potentially scaling it to help millions more. As I walked back to where Jessica was working, I realized that the scared graduate student who'd left Columbia to chase an impossible dream had somehow become an entrepreneur whose work mattered enough to catch Amazon's attention. The real question now wasn't whether my family would finally understand what I'd been building. It was whether I was ready to take it to the next level. The flight to Seattle gave me 3 uninterrupted hours to think, which turned out to be both a blessing and a curse. As the plane climbed above the clouds, I found myself oscillating between excitement and panic, confidence and imposter syndrome, all while reviewing the presentation I'd spent the weekend perfecting. Jessica had wanted to come with me, but we'd decided it was better for one of us to stay in New York to keep operations running smoothly. Our customer base had continued growing. We'd added 17 new clients just since the Amazon call, and we couldn't afford any service interruptions while I was pursuing what might be the biggest opportunity of our company's existence. Just remember, Jessica had said as she dropped me off at JFK, you built something they want. You're not asking them for a favor, they came to you. Easy for her to say. She wasn't about to walk into Amazon's headquarters and potentially negotiate a deal that would change both of our lives forever. I'd spent the weekend preparing obsessively, creating detailed presentations about our technology stack, our customer retention rates, our growth projections, and our competitive advantages. I'd even prepared for potential objections and concerns Amazon might raise about integrating Streamline Ops into their ecosystem. But what I couldn't prepare for was the emotional weight of what this meeting represented. For 3 years, I'd been operating in a bubble of determination and hustle, focused so intently on building and growing the company that I'd barely allowed myself to consider what success might actually look like. Now, suddenly, I was being forced to confront the possibility that I might have already achieved it. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was flying to Seattle on the same day my cousin Danny was starting his new position as district manager at the bank. Yesterday, at the family reunion, his promotion had been the crown jewel of success stories. Today, I was potentially negotiating a deal that would make his annual salary look like pocket change. Yet, I hadn't told my family about the Seattle trip. I'd simply said I had business meetings to attend, which had earned me the usual concerned looks and gentle suggestions that I should consider more stable opportunities. Landing at SeaTac Airport, I was struck by how different Seattle felt from New York. The pace was somehow both more relaxed and more intensely focused. Even the Uber ride to Amazon's South Lake Union campus felt like entering a different world, a place where the impossible happened so regularly that it had become routine. Amazon's headquarters was exactly what I'd expected, and nothing like I'd imagined at the same time. The scale was massive, but the atmosphere felt surprisingly welcoming. David Chen met me in the lobby, a tall man in his 40s with an easy smile and the kind of presence that immediately put me at ease. Ms. Rodriguez, welcome to Seattle, he said, extending his hand. I hope your flight was comfortable. We're all very excited to meet the person behind Streamline Ops. As he led me through security and up to the meeting rooms, I couldn't help but marvel at the energy of the place. Everywhere I looked, there were teams collaborating on projects that would likely impact millions of people. It was the kind of environment I'd dreamed about since my first computer science class. A place where technical innovation and real-world impact intersected at massive scale. Before we dive into the formal presentations, David said as we walked, I want you to know that everyone here has been incredibly impressed by what you've accomplished. Building enterprise-level AI technology as a solo founder, then scaling it to serve nearly 1,000 customers. That's not something we see very often. The conference room overlooked Lake Union, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made the space feel boundless. Sarah Palmer and Kevin Liu were there, along with 3 new faces, Dr. Rachel Kim from the AI research team, Marcus Thompson from Small Business Partnerships, and Linda Foster, who David introduced as the VP of Strategic Acquisitions. Linda Foster commanded immediate attention, not through intimidation, but through the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of evaluating companies and technologies at the highest level. She was probably in her early 50s, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to process information faster than most people could speak. Elena, she said, settling into her chair, we've been following Streamline Ops for longer than you might realize. The TechCrunch article brought you to our immediate attention. But we'd already noticed your platform through our small business partner surveys. Your customers consistently report higher satisfaction rates and better performance metrics than users of competing platforms. That revelation surprised me. Amazon had been watching Streamline Ops before we'd even known we were on their radar. The next 2 hours felt like the most intense job interview, technical exam, and business negotiation of my life, all rolled into one. Dr. Kim walked me through detailed questions about my AI algorithms, testing my understanding of machine learning principles, and my approach to data privacy and security. Her questions were sophisticated and challenging, but I could tell she was impressed by the depth of my technical knowledge and the elegance of the solutions I'd developed. Marcus Thompson focused on our customer relationships and market position. He wanted to understand not just what Streamline Ops did, but why our customers chose us over competitors, and how we'd built such strong retention rates. Your customer testimonials are remarkable, he said, pulling up a tablet with screenshots of reviews and case studies. Maria Santos says Streamline Ops changed her life. Roberto Silva calls it the best business investment he's ever made. These aren't typical software reviews. They're talking about you like you saved their businesses. In many cases we did, I replied, and then spent 20 minutes walking them through specific customer success stories. I explained how our AI had helped a family bakery in Portland optimize their online ordering during the pandemic, enabling them to maintain revenue when foot traffic disappeared. I described how a small electronics retailer in Atlanta had used our inventory predictions to avoid the supply chain disasters that had devastated their competitors. Kevin Liu wanted to understand our business model and growth strategy. He drilled down into our pricing structure, our customer acquisition costs, our lifetime value metrics, and our plans for international expansion. Your unit economics are exceptional, he noted, reviewing the financial projections I'd prepared. Most SaaS companies your size are burning cash to fuel growth. You've managed to scale profitably while maintaining impressive growth rates. How did you achieve that balance? I explained our approach, starting with a core platform that solved immediate problems, then expanding features based on actual customer needs rather than theoretical market research. We'd grown organically, reinvesting revenue into product development and customer success rather than expensive marketing campaigns. Our customers are our best marketing channel, I said. When a small business owner sees their revenue increase by 150% in the first year of using Streamline Ops, they tell other business owners. Word of mouth in the small business community is incredibly powerful. Linda Foster had been mostly quiet during the technical and business discussions, but I could see her taking notes and occasionally exchanging glances with her colleagues. Finally, she leaned forward. Elena, let me ask you a different kind of question. Streamline Ops has been your life for 3 years. You've built it from nothing into something remarkable. Why would you consider selling it to us instead of continuing to grow it independently? It was the question I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. I took a moment to consider my answer carefully. I started Streamline Ops because I saw small businesses struggling with problems the technology could solve, but existing solutions were either too expensive or too complicated for them to use effectively. Every decision I've made has been focused on democratizing access to enterprise-level tools. I paused, looking around the table at these executives who had the power to scale my vision beyond anything I could achieve alone. Amazon has resources and reach that I could never match as an independent company. You have relationships with millions of small businesses, infrastructure that could support unlimited growth, and teams of engineers who could accelerate development in ways that would take me decades to achieve on my own. But more importantly, you have a track record of helping small businesses succeed. Linda nodded approvingly. And what would concern you about joining Amazon? Honestly, I'd be concerned about losing the personal connection that makes Streamline Ops special. Our customers don't just use our software, they trust us with their livelihoods. I'd want to ensure that Amazon's scale doesn't come at the expense of that personal touch. Dr. Kim jumped in. That's actually one of the reasons we're interested in acquiring Streamline Ops rather than trying to build competing technology in-house. We recognize that your approach to customer relationships is a core competitive advantage that can't be easily replicated. The conversation continued for another hour, covering everything from technical integration challenges to cultural fit concerns. By the time Linda Foster suggested we take a break, My head was spinning with possibilities and considerations I'd never had to think about before. During the break, David Chen walked me to a different conference room with an even more spectacular view of the Seattle skyline. "How are you feeling so far?" he asked. "Overwhelmed, excited, terrified," I admitted. "This is all happening so fast." 3 months ago, my biggest concern was whether we could afford to hire a third employee. Now we're talking about joining Amazon. He smiled. "That's a normal response. Major acquisitions always feel surreal, especially for founders who've been so focused on day-to-day operations that they haven't had time to consider the bigger picture." When we reconvened, Linda Foster got straight to the point. "Elena, we'd like to make you a formal offer to acquire Streamline Ops. The preliminary terms would include a base purchase price of $12 million, with additional performance-based payouts that could bring the total to $20 million over the next 3 years. You and Jessica would join Amazon as senior executives leading the small business AI division, with full autonomy over Streamline Ops development and expansion." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. $12 million. $20 million with performance bonuses. Numbers that seemed completely disconnected from the reality of my life just a week ago. "We'd want to finalize the deal within 60 days, Linda continued, "but we understand you'll need time to review the terms with your legal and financial advisors. David will send you the detailed term sheet tomorrow." The flight back to New York passed in a blur. I kept staring at the notes I'd taken during the meeting, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. Amazon didn't just want to buy Streamline Ops. They wanted to make it the foundation for their small business AI strategy. As the plane descended toward JFK, I realized that everything was about to change. The question was no longer whether my family would understand what I'd been building. It was whether I was ready to step into a completely different version of my life. And somewhere over Pennsylvania, I decided that I was. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange kind of suspended animation. On the surface, everything appeared normal. I continued managing Streamline Ops' daily operations. Jessica and I worked on product updates, and we onboarded new customers at our usual pace. But beneath that routine, I was living with a secret that felt too enormous to contain. Amazon's formal term sheet had arrived exactly when David Chen promised it would. 23 pages of legal language that translated to the most life-changing opportunity I'd ever encountered. $12 million upfront, with performance milestones that could reach $20 million. Full integration into Amazon's small business ecosystem. A leadership role that would give me resources to scale Streamline Ops beyond anything I'd imagined possible. I'd hired Sarah Chen, no relation to David, one of New York's top tech attorneys, to review the terms. She'd spent 2 days analyzing every clause, every contingency, every protection and obligation outlined in the agreement. "Elena," she'd said during our review meeting in her Manhattan office, "this is an exceptional offer. Amazon is essentially betting that your technology and vision are worth a significant portion of their small business strategy budget. The terms are founder-friendly, the valuation is strong, and they're offering you real authority to continue developing your platform." "But?" I'd asked, sensing there was more. "But you need to understand what you're committing to. This isn't just selling your company, it's joining Amazon permanently. The earnout structure means you'll be tied to their performance metrics for the next 3 years. If you're not ready for that level of corporate integration, you should walk away now." I'd been wrestling with that decision ever since. The rational part of my mind saw this as validation of everything I'd worked toward, a chance to take my vision of democratizing e-commerce technology and scale it to millions of small businesses worldwide. But another part of me worried about losing the intimate connection with customers that had made Streamline Ops special in the first place. More immediately challenging was navigating my family relationships while carrying this secret. Every conversation felt loaded with subtext. Every casual question about my computer business carried weight they couldn't possibly understand. The previous Sunday, I joined my parents for dinner at their house in Queens. My mother had made arroz con pollo, my childhood favorite, and we'd fallen into our usual pattern of catching up on family news and neighborhood gossip. But when my father asked about Streamline Ops, I'd found myself giving the same vague responses I'd been offering for 3 years. It's going well, Papi. We're growing steadily. But when are you going to get serious benefits, Elena? Health insurance, retirement savings, job security? This startup thing can't last forever. I'd wanted to tell him that Amazon was offering me more job security than most people ever achieved in their entire careers. I'd wanted to explain that my startup thing had caught the attention of one of the world's most powerful companies. Instead, I just nodded and said I was being careful about the future. The weight of keeping this secret was becoming unbearable, but I wasn't ready to share it yet. Partly because the deal wasn't finalized. There were still due diligence processes to complete, legal reviews to finish, and final approvals to secure. But mostly because I wasn't sure I could handle my family's reaction, whatever it might be. Talk. Would they be proud? Skeptical? Would they finally understand what I'd been building, or would they find new reasons to worry about my choices? Jessica had been my only confidant throughout this process, and even she was starting to show the strain of maintaining normal operations while processing the magnitude of what might happen. I keep forgetting that we might not be working in this WeWork space much longer, she'd said that morning, gesturing around our modest corner of the shared office. It's surreal to think that in 2 months, we could be Amazon employees working out of their New York office. That was another consideration I hadn't fully processed. Amazon wanted Jessica and me to relocate to Seattle within 6 months of the acquisition closing. They'd provide generous relocation packages and help us find housing. But it would mean leaving New York, leaving my family, starting over in a completely different environment. I'd lived in New York my entire life. My parents were 20 minutes away in Queens. My childhood friends, my college network, my favorite bodega where the owner remembered how I liked my coffee. All of it would be 3,000 miles away. Are you having second thoughts? Jessica had asked, noticing my distant expression. I'm having all the thoughts, I'd replied. Second thoughts, third thoughts, thoughts I didn't even know existed. Want to talk through it? We'd spent the next hour working through a decision matrix Jessica had learned in her MBA program before switching to UX design. Pros and cons, weighted by importance, scored on a scale from 1 to 10. It was a methodical approach to what felt like an emotional decision. The pros were compelling. Financial security beyond anything I'd dreamed possible. Resources to scale Streamline Ops globally. Integration with Amazon's massive customer base. Protection from competitors who might try to replicate our technology, and the opportunity to impact millions of small businesses instead of hundreds. The cons were more personal. Loss of independence, corporate bureaucracy, distance from family, pressure to hit Amazon's performance targets, and the risk of losing the personal touch that made Streamline Ops special. The rational choice is obvious, Jessica had concluded. But this isn't just a rational decision. This is about what kind of life you want to build. That evening, I'd taken a long walk through Prospect Park, trying to clear my head and gain some perspective. The autumn air was crisp, and the changing leaves reminded me how quickly things could transform when the conditions were right. I'd started thinking about my grandfather, my mother's father, who had emigrated from El Salvador with nothing but determination and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. He'd spent 40 years as a mechanic, building a reputation for honesty and skill that kept customers coming back decade after decade. He'd never become wealthy, but he'd created something valuable: trust, expertise, and a legacy of helping people solve their problems. In many ways, Streamline Ops was my version of his mechanic shop. I'd built it by solving real problems for real people, earning trust through results rather than marketing promises. The personal relationships, the deep understanding of customer needs, the commitment to helping small businesses succeed. These weren't just business strategies. They were values inherited from watching him work. But my grandfather had also taught me about recognizing opportunities when they presented themselves. Mia, he'd told me shortly before he passed away, the difference between success and regret is often just the courage to say yes when the right door opens. Was Amazon the right door? Or was I being seduced by the validation and financial security of a large corporation, potentially sacrificing the independence and personal mission that had driven me to start Streamline Ops in the first place? My phone buzzed with a text from David Chen. Elena, wanted to check in on your decision timeline. We're excited to move forward whenever you're ready. But understand this is a major decision. Any questions or concerns we can address. I stared at the message for several minutes before typing back. Still reviewing the terms with my team. Should have an answer by early next week. Take all the time you need. We're confident this will be a great partnership. Partnership? That word kept coming up in my conversations with Amazon's team. They weren't just buying Streamline Ops. They were inviting me to help shape their entire approach to serving small businesses. Linda Foster had emphasized this point repeatedly during our Seattle meeting. Elena, we're not looking for a technology acquisition that we can absorb and optimize according to our existing processes. We're looking for entrepreneurial leadership that can teach us how to serve markets we've never effectively reached. The more I considered it, the more I realized this decision wasn't just about Streamline Ops' future, it was about defining what kind of entrepreneur I wanted to be. Did I want to remain a small, independent company founder, closely connected to individual customers but limited in reach? Or did I want to become a corporate executive, with the resources to impact millions of small businesses, but within the constraints of a large organization? Both paths had merit. Both aligned with my core mission of helping small businesses succeed. The question was which approach would create more value in the long run. That weekend, I'd made a decision that surprised even me. I'd called my parents and asked if I could come over for Sunday dinner. Not just the casual drop-by visits I usually made, but a formal family gathering. I'd asked them to invite Carlos and his girlfriend Maria, and even suggested they call my Uncle Miguel and Aunt Rosa if they were available. Elena, what's the occasion? My mother had asked, her voice carrying a note of concern. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, Mammy. I just have some news to share with the family. Good news or bad news? Good news. Really good news. I'd spent the rest of the weekend rehearsing what I would say, how I would explain not just the Amazon offer but the 3-year journey that had led to this moment. I wanted them to understand that Streamline Ops wasn't just a hobby or a phase. It was a real business that had created real value and caught the attention of one of the world's most successful companies. More than that, I wanted them to see that the daughter they'd worried about, the one who'd dropped out of graduate school to chase an impossible dream, had actually been building something extraordinary all along. But as Sunday evening approached, I found myself getting more nervous rather than more confident. What if they didn't understand? What if they focused on the risks rather than the opportunities? What if this moment, which should be pure celebration, became another family debate about my life choices? There was only one way to find out. Tomorrow night, the secret I'd been carrying for 3 weeks would finally see the light of day. And my family would learn that their irresponsible daughter had built something that Amazon wanted to buy for more money than any of them had ever imagined. Sunday evening arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Queens feel almost magical. I stood outside my parents' house, the same modest 2-story home where I'd grown up, staring at the warm light spilling from the kitchen windows. Through the glass, I could see my mother moving around the kitchen with her usual efficiency, my father setting the table with the good china, the set they only used for special occasions. They had no idea that tonight would be more special than any occasion they'd prepared for. I'd spent the entire day in a state of nervous energy that Jessica had diplomatically described as, quote, manic preparation. I'd printed out customer testimonials, revenue charts, press clippings, and even screenshots of messages from small business owners whose lives had been changed by Streamline Ops. My laptop bag contained a presentation I'd put together specifically for my family, complete with simplified explanations of AI technology and comparisons to companies they'd recognize. But as I walked up the front steps, I realized that all the preparation in the world couldn't predict how this conversation would unfold. Elena. My mother called out as I opened the front door. Perfect timing. Your Uncle Miguel just arrived, and Carlos is in the living room with Maria. The house smelled like sofrito and garlic, the familiar aromas that had defined Sunday dinners throughout my childhood. But tonight, even the comfort foods couldn't settle the butterflies in my stomach. My father emerged from the kitchen, wearing the burgundy sweater my mother had bought him last Christmas and a curious expression. Mija, your mother says you have big news. Please tell me you're not moving to California again. I laughed, despite my nerves. No, Papi, I'm not moving to California. Good, Uncle Miguel said, appearing in the hallway with a beer in his hand. California is too expensive, too crowded, and too full of people with crazy ideas. If only he knew. We gathered in the living room, the same space where I'd announced my decision to study computer science, where I'd told them about dropping out of graduate school, where I'd endured countless conversations about getting a real job. Tonight this room would witness a very different kind of announcement. Carlos and his girlfriend Maria were cuddled on the love seat, looking relaxed and happy in the way that couples do when their biggest concern is choosing what to watch on Netflix. My Aunt Rosa had arrived with homemade flan, because no family gathering was complete without her signature dessert. Everyone was present, everyone was comfortable, and everyone was expecting. What exactly? Before we eat, I said, standing near the fireplace, I wanted to share some news with all of you. The room quieted, but I could see varying degrees of concern and curiosity on their faces. My mother clasped her hands together, a gesture I recognized as her preparing for either very good news or very bad news. 3 weeks ago, I began, I received a phone call that changed everything. I'd practiced this opening line dozens of times, but speaking it aloud to my family felt completely different than rehearsing it in my apartment. Their attention was focused entirely on me, and I could feel the weight of their expectations. The call was from Amazon. Uncle Miguel raised an eyebrow. Amazon? Like the delivery company? Amazon is much more than a delivery company, Tio. They're one of the largest technology companies in the world. And they called because they want to acquire Streamline Ops. The silence that followed was profound. I could hear the kitchen timer ticking in the background, the neighbor's dog barking 3 houses down, and what sounded like my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. Acquire? My father repeated slowly. What does that mean? It means they want to buy my company, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. They want to purchase Streamline Ops and integrate it into their business platform. Carlos sat up straighter. Elena, are you serious? Amazon wants to buy your company? I flew to Seattle last week to meet with their executive team. We've been in negotiations for 3 weeks. They've made a formal offer. My mother's eyes were wide. How much? She asked, then immediately looked embarrassed for asking. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd been simultaneously anticipating and dreading. $12 million up front, with performance bonuses that could bring the total to $20 million over 3 years. The room erupted. 20 million? Uncle Miguel's beer bottle stopped halfway to his mouth. Dollars? Aunt Rosa asked, as if there might be some other currency involved. Elena, this is insane, Carlos said, standing up and staring at me like I'd just announced I was from another planet. My father remained seated, but his expression had shifted from casual curiosity to intense focus. Misha, are you telling us that your computer business is worth $20 million? Potentially, yes. But more than that, Papi Amazon believes Streamline Ops can help millions of small businesses succeed. They want to use our technology as the foundation for their entire small business AI strategy. I pulled out my laptop and opened the presentation I'd prepared. For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through what Streamline Ops actually did, showing them screenshots of our platform, reading testimonials from customers, and explaining how our AI technology had helped businesses across the country increase their revenue and efficiency. This is Maya's jewelry business, I said, showing them before and after photos of my friend's operation. 3 years ago, she was making earrings in her kitchen. Today she has a 6-figure business with customers in 12 countries. Our platform helped her manage inventory, predict trends, and automate her marketing. I clicked to the next slide. This is Roberto Silva's restaurant chain. When the pandemic hit, our online ordering system kept his business alive while his competitors were closing down. And this, I said, showing them a screenshot of our customer dashboard, is just from last month. Our platform helped small businesses process $2.3 million in transactions, prevented over 50,000 inventory mistakes, and saved business owners an average of 15 hours per week in manual work. The room was completely silent as they absorbed this information. I could see them trying to reconcile the Elena they thought they knew, the impractical dreamer with unrealistic ambitions, with the Elena who was presenting concrete evidence of building something genuinely valuable. My mother was the first to speak. Elena, I don't understand. If your business is doing so well, why haven't you told us? It was a fair question, and one I'd been preparing to answer. Because every time I tried to share good news about Streamline Ops, the response was concern about stability, suggestions that I should get a real job, warnings about the risks of technology businesses. I stopped sharing because it felt like you'd already decided my choices were mistakes. My father's expression softened slightly. We weren't trying to discourage you, Mija. We were trying to protect you. We've seen too many people chase dreams that don't work out. I understand that, Poppy. But your protection felt like judgment. And after a while, it became easier to keep my successes private rather than defend them. Uncle Miguel leaned forward. Elena, I need to ask you something directly. Is this real? Are you really telling us that Amazon, the Amazon, wants to pay you $20 million for something you built in your bedroom? I nodded. It's real, Tio. I have the term sheet. I have recordings of the meetings. I have an attorney reviewing the final contracts. Show me, he said. I'd been prepared for skepticism, so I pulled out my phone and showed him the email thread with David Chen, the calendar invitations for the Seattle meetings, and even a photo I'd taken of the Amazon headquarters lobby during my visit. Carlos was staring at the photos with an expression of complete bewilderment. Elena, this is incredible, but why didn't you tell us you were this successful? We had no idea your business was anything like this. Because success in technology doesn't look like success in construction or banking or teaching, I replied. My office is a shared workspace in Brooklyn. I don't have a corner office or a company car or any of the traditional markers of success you'd recognize. But I've built something that solves real problems for real people, and now one of the world's most successful companies wants to buy it. Aunt Rosa had been unusually quiet during this entire conversation, but finally she spoke up. Elena, what does this mean for your future? If you sell your company to Amazon, what happens next? They want Jessica and me to join Amazon as senior executives. We'd move to Seattle and lead their small business AI division. We'd have the resources to scale Streamline Ops to serve millions of customers instead of hundreds. Move to Seattle? My mother asked, her voice carrying a note of concern. That's so far away. It's a 3-hour flight, Mammy. And it's an incredible opportunity to take everything I've built and make it even bigger. My father had been unusually quiet during this part of the conversation, but I could see him processing everything I'd shared. Finally, he looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not pride exactly, but something approaching respect. Elena, he said slowly, I owe you an apology. The room went silent again. For 3 years, I've been telling you to get serious about your future, to find a stable job, to stop playing with computers. I thought you were being irresponsible, chasing a fantasy that would eventually leave you with nothing. He paused, looking around the room at the rest of the family before continuing. But you weren't playing. You were building. And while I was worrying about your stability, you were creating something more valuable than anything I've ever built in 40 years of construction. My mother reached over and took his hand. Roberto, we all made assumptions. No, he said firmly. I made assumptions. Elena tried to tell us what she was doing, and I dismissed it because I didn't understand it. I'm sorry, mija. I should have trusted you. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. This wasn't the reaction I'd expected, but it was exactly what I'd hoped for without realizing it. There's something else, I said, taking a deep breath. I haven't made my final decision yet. The offer is incredible, but it means giving up the independence I've worked so hard to build. It means joining a large corporation with all the benefits and constraints that come with that. What are you leaning toward? Carlos asked. I looked around the room at the faces of the people who'd shaped my values, my work ethic, and my understanding of what mattered in life. I'm leaning toward saying yes, I said. But I wanted to share this news with all of you before making the final decision. Your opinions matter to me, even when we disagree. Uncle Miguel set down his beer and looked at me seriously. Elena, 20 years ago, I told you that technology businesses come and go, that you should focus on something stable. I was wrong. You saw the future better than any of us did." He paused, then smiled. "If Amazon thinks your company is worth $20 million, then you should probably listen to them." The conversation continued for another hour, with questions about the timeline, the logistics of moving to Seattle, and what this would mean for Streamline Ops customers. But the tone had completely shifted. Instead of skepticism and concern, my family was asking thoughtful questions about an opportunity they finally understood was real. As we finally sat down to dinner, my mother squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'm so proud of you, Mija. Your grandfather would be proud too." For the first time in 3 years, I felt like my family truly saw me, not as the daughter who'd made questionable choices, but as the entrepreneur who'd built something extraordinary. Tomorrow, I would call David Chen and accept Amazon's offer. Tonight, I would enjoy dinner with a family who finally understood what I'd been working toward all along. Monday morning arrived with an unusual sense of clarity. I woke up in my Brooklyn apartment for what might be one of the last times as an independent entrepreneur, and instead of the anxiety I'd been carrying for weeks, I felt something that surprised me: peace. The family dinner had changed everything. Not just because my family finally understood what I'd built, but because their reaction had helped me understand something about myself. For 3 years, I'd been carrying the weight of their skepticism alongside my own self-doubt. Their approval hadn't been necessary for my success, but having it made the decision to move forward feel complete in a way I hadn't anticipated. I arrived at the WeWork space early, before Jessica or any of our neighboring startups had shown up. The quiet allowed me to process the magnitude of what was about to happen. By the end of the day, I would either be the founder of an independent AI company or an Amazon executive. There was no middle ground. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Mija, I couldn't sleep last night thinking about our conversation. I keep remembering when you were 8 years old and took apart the radio in the garage, then put it back together so it worked better than before. You've always seen solutions where other people saw problems. Call Amazon." I stared at that message for several minutes. Roberto Martinez, the man who'd spent 3 years telling me to get a stable job, was now encouraging me to accept the biggest risk of my career. The irony wasn't lost on me, but more than that, it felt like a fundamental shift in how my family saw my judgment and capabilities. Jessica arrived at 8:30, carrying 2 cups of coffee from our usual spot, and wearing an expression of barely contained anticipation. "So," she said, settling into her chair, "did you tell them?" I filled her in on the previous evening's conversation, from my father's initial confusion to Uncle Miguel's acknowledgement that he'd been wrong about technology businesses. Jessica listened intently, occasionally shaking her head in amazement. "Elena, that's incredible. How does it feel to finally have your family understand what we've been building?" "Validating," I said, "but also irrelevant to the actual decision. Whether they understood or not, Streamline Ops has been successful. Whether they approved or not, Amazon was still going to make this offer. But it matters to you personally." "It does. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But I realized something last night. I've been seeking their approval for the wrong reasons. I thought I needed them to validate my choices, when what I actually needed was to trust my own judgment enough to make the right choice regardless of their opinion." Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "And what is the right choice?" I took a deep breath and looked around our modest corner of the shared workspace. In 18 months, we'd grown from just me working alone to a team of 7 people spread across 3 time zones. Our customer success stories filled multiple filing cabinets. Our revenue had grown from $50,000 to nearly $800,000 annually. But most importantly, we'd proven that sophisticated AI technology could be made accessible to small businesses that had never had access to enterprise-level tools. "The right choice is accepting Amazon's offer," I said. "Not because of the money, although the financial security is incredible. Not because of the validation, although having Amazon recognize our value feels amazing. The right choice is accepting because it's the best way to scale our mission." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. We've proven that our approach works with hundreds of customers. Amazon can help us prove it works with millions." At 10 a.m., I called David Chen. "Elena, good morning," he said, his voice warm with anticipation. "I hope you had a good weekend to think things over." "I did, David. I'm calling to accept Amazon's offer. There was a brief pause. Then I could hear the smile in his voice. That's wonderful news. Linda Foster and the entire team are going to be thrilled. Welcome to Amazon. The next hour was a whirlwind of logistics. David connected me with Amazon's legal team to begin finalizing the acquisition paperwork. I was introduced to Karen Williams, who would be my primary contact for the integration process, and Marcus Chen, yet another Chen, apparently Amazon was full of them, who would help coordinate our transition to Seattle. The next 60 days are going to be intensive, Karen explained during our introductory call. We'll need to complete technical due diligence, finalize the legal documentation, and begin planning the integration of Streamline Ops into Amazon's small business platform. Are you prepared for that timeline? We're ready, I replied, and I realized I meant it completely. The afternoon brought a different kind of challenge, telling our customers. Streamline Ops served 847 active businesses, from Maya's jewelry company to multi-location retail chains. Each of them had trusted us with their operations, and they deserved to know what was happening before they read about it in TechCrunch. Jessica and I spent 3 hours crafting an email that struck the right balance between excitement and reassurance. We wanted customers to understand that this was a positive development that would bring them better service and more features, not a corporate takeover that would diminish their experience. Dear Streamline Ops community, the email began, today marks an extraordinary milestone in our company's journey, and we wanted you to be the first to know about an exciting development that will enhance our ability to serve your business needs. We explained the acquisition, emphasized Amazon's commitment to supporting small businesses, and outlined the improvements customers could expect over the coming months. Most importantly, we assured them that the personal relationships and dedicated support that had made Streamline Ops special would continue under Amazon's ownership. Your success has always been our success, the email concluded. And that mission becomes even stronger with Amazon's resources behind us. The responses started coming in within minutes. Maya was among the first to reply, Elena, this is amazing! You've gone from helping me organize my jewelry inventory to joining one of the biggest companies in the world. I'm so proud of you and so excited to see what Streamline Ops becomes next. Roberto Silva from the restaurant chain wrote, Congratulations on this incredible achievement. Streamline Ops saved my business during the pandemic. And knowing that Amazon recognizes its value makes me even more confident in our partnership. But not all the responses were celebratory. A few customers expressed concern about what the acquisition might mean for Streamline Ops' personal touch and responsiveness. One customer, Jennifer Walsh, who owned a boutique pet supply company, wrote, I chose Streamline Ops specifically because you weren't a big corporation. I'm worried this means we'll lose the personal service that made you special. Those concerns were valid, and they echoed my own worries about maintaining Streamline Ops culture within Amazon's massive organization. Jessica and I spent the rest of the afternoon personally calling our largest customers to address their questions and concerns directly. The technology will get better, the features will expand, and the support will improve, I explained to Jennifer during our call. But the mission remains the same, helping small businesses compete with enterprise-level tools and insights. By 6 p.m., we'd spoken with representatives from 37 different customers, and the overall response was overwhelmingly positive. Our customers trusted us, and that trust extended to our decision to join Amazon. That evening, I sat in my apartment working through the mountain of paperwork that would formalize the biggest decision of my professional life. Bank account information for the wire transfer, employment agreements, stock option plans, relocation assistance forms. Each document represented another step away from the independence I'd fought so hard to achieve, and toward an integration with one of the world's most powerful companies. My phone rang as I was reviewing the non-disclosure agreements. The caller ID showed my brother Carlos. Elena, I've been thinking about last night all day, he said without preamble. I need to apologize. For what? For not taking you seriously. For not asking better questions about what you were building. For assuming that because I didn't understand your work, it wasn't important. I set down the contract I'd been reading. Carlos, you don't need to apologize. Everyone did the best they could with the information they had. No, that's not true. The information was available. I just didn't bother to seek it out. I could have asked you to show me your platform, to explain how it worked, to introduce me to your customers. Instead, I made assumptions based on my own limited understanding of technology. His words hit me unexpectedly hard. Carlos had always been the supportive brother, the one who cheered for my successes without understanding their significance. Hearing him acknowledge that he could have done better meant more than I'd realized it would. "What made you think about this today?" I asked. I spent my lunch break researching Amazon's acquisition history. Do you know how rare it is for them to acquire a 3-year-old startup founded by a single person? Elena, you didn't just build a successful business. You built something so innovative and valuable that one of the world's smartest companies wants to make it the foundation of their small business strategy. I found myself smiling, despite the emotional weight of the conversation. It still doesn't feel real. That's because you've been focused on the work instead of the recognition. But Elena, what you've accomplished is extraordinary. And tomorrow, when you sign those contracts, you're not just changing your life. You're positioning yourself to change millions of other lives. After we hung up, I returned to the paperwork with a renewed sense of purpose. Each signature, each initial, each legal acknowledgement brought me closer to a future I'd never imagined but now couldn't wait to embrace. The last document I signed was the formal acceptance letter to David Chen, confirming my commitment to join Amazon and integrate Streamline Ops into their platform. As I scanned and emailed it back to their legal team, I realized I was no longer Elena Rodriguez, independent entrepreneur. I was about to become Elena Rodriguez, Amazon executive. The transformation was both exhilarating and terrifying, but sitting in my apartment at 11 p.m., surrounded by the contracts that would change everything, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete confidence that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Tomorrow, the world would learn that Amazon had acquired Streamline Ops. The day after that, Jessica and I would begin planning our move to Seattle. Within 60 days, we'd be working out of Amazon's headquarters, scaling our platform to serve customers we'd never imagined reaching. But tonight, I was still Elena Rodriguez from Queens, the girl who'd taken apart radios and built them back better, who'd seen solutions where others saw problems, who'd trusted her vision even when no one else understood it. And that girl had just changed her life forever. The TechCrunch headline hit at 6:47 a.m. Pacific Time. Amazon acquires AI e-commerce platform Streamline Ops in strategic small business play. By 7:15, my phone had received 43 notifications from LinkedIn, Twitter, and various news alerts. By 8 a.m., I had interview requests from Bloomberg, Forbes, and 3 podcasts I'd never heard of. The surreal part wasn't that the news had broken. Amazon's communications team had coordinated the announcement perfectly, but that people were talking about me as if I were someone important. Rising tech entrepreneur Elena Rodriguez, one article called me, the AI visionary behind Streamline Ops, read another. After 3 years of being treated as a dreamer with unrealistic ambitions, suddenly I was being described as a strategic mastermind. Jessica and I met at our usual coffee shop in Dumbo, both of us scrolling through coverage on our phones with expressions of bewildered amusement. "Listen to this one," Jessica said, reading from her screen. Rodriguez's sophisticated approach to democratizing enterprise-level AI represents a new paradigm in small business technology. "Elena, they're calling you sophisticated. Yesterday, my Uncle Miguel was worried I'd never have job security," I replied, showing her a tweet that had been retweeted 847 times. "Today, Business Insider is calling me a, quote, disruptive force in e-commerce innovation." The media attention was flattering but overwhelming. More meaningful were the messages from customers, fellow entrepreneurs, and people I hadn't heard from in years. My computer science professor from Columbia wrote, "Elena, I always knew you'd find a way to apply technology to solve real problems. Congratulations on this incredible achievement." Even more surprising was an email from Dr. Jonathan Hartwell, my former graduate advisor, who dismissed my business-focused thesis proposal. "Elena, I've been reading about Streamline Ops and its acquisition by Amazon. I owe you an apology. Your instincts about practical applications of AI were ahead of the academic curve. I should have supported your vision instead of steering you toward purely theoretical research." But the message that meant the most came from Maya. "Elena, I keep thinking about that night in my kitchen when you first saw how frustrated I was with managing my online sales. You didn't just help me solve a problem. You saw a bigger solution that could help thousands of people like me. Thank you for not giving up on that vision. even when it meant leaving graduate school and disappointing people who didn't understand what you were building. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of due diligence meetings, integration planning sessions, and preparation for our move to Seattle. Amazon's acquisition process was more thorough than anything I'd experienced, but also more supportive. They assigned us dedicated teams for legal review, technical integration, financial planning, and employee transition. Karen Williams, our primary integration coordinator, had become something like a project manager for our entire life transformation. She scheduled our apartment hunting trip to Seattle, coordinated with Amazon's relocation specialists, and even helped us understand the cultural differences between startup life and corporate life. Amazon's leadership principles might feel overwhelming at first, she explained during one of our weekly check-ins. But they're designed to maintain entrepreneurial thinking even within a large organization. Your customer obsession and bias for action are exactly what we want to preserve from Streamline Ops. The technical integration meetings were fascinating and intimidating in equal measure. Amazon's small business platform team had been studying Streamline Ops for months, and they had detailed plans for how our AI algorithms could be scaled to serve millions of customers instead of hundreds. Dr. Rachel Kim, who'd led my technical interview during the Seattle visit, walked Jessica and me through their infrastructure capabilities during a video call that left me speechless. Elena, your machine learning models are excellent, but they're currently limited by processing power and data storage constraints. Amazon's cloud infrastructure can eliminate those limitations entirely. We're talking about real-time analysis of billions of transactions, predictive modeling across entire market segments, and personalization capabilities that adapt to individual business patterns. She pulled up a demonstration that showed how Streamline Ops' inventory prediction system could be enhanced with Amazon's massive dataset of purchasing trends, seasonal patterns, and economic indicators. Instead of analyzing one business's sales history to predict their inventory needs, we could analyze similar businesses across the entire economy to provide recommendations that account for macro trends your individual customers might not see coming. It was exactly the kind of scaling I'd dreamed about but never imagined would be possible. The resources Amazon was offering didn't just represent growth. They represented a fundamental transformation in what Streamline Ops could accomplish. The hardest part of the transition wasn't the technical integration or the business planning, it was saying goodbye to New York. I'd lived in the city my entire life, and leaving felt like abandoning a part of my identity. My parents took it better than I'd expected. The morning I'd told them about the move to Seattle, my mother had surprised me by saying, "Mija, New York will always be here. But this opportunity might not come again." My father had been characteristically direct. "Elena, 3 months ago I was worried you didn't have a stable future. Now you're moving across the country to work for one of the most successful companies in the world. Seattle is lucky to have you." Carlos had offered to drive with me cross-country, turning the relocation into a road trip adventure. "Besides," he'd said, "I want to see this Amazon headquarters you keep talking about. I need to understand where my little sister is going to be changing the world." Our last week in New York was a series of goodbye dinners, farewell drinks, and bittersweet visits to all the places that had defined my adult life. The bodega where I'd bought coffee every morning for 3 years. The library where I'd done much of Streamline Ops' early development work. The WeWork space where Jessica and I had spent countless hours debugging code and celebrating small victories. Maya organized a farewell party for me at a rooftop bar in Brooklyn, inviting customers, fellow entrepreneurs, and friends from college. Standing on that rooftop looking out at the Manhattan skyline while surrounded by people whose businesses had been transformed by something I'd built in my bedroom, I felt a profound sense of completion. "Elena," Roberto Silva said during an impromptu toast, "when I first started using Streamline Ops, I thought I was just getting help with online orders. I didn't realize I was getting access to the kind of technology that usually only big corporations could afford. You leveled the playing field for people like me." The sentiment was echoed throughout the evening. Business owners who'd grown from struggling solo operations to thriving companies, entrepreneurs who'd used our platform to launch new ventures, and even competitors who'd been inspired by our approach to serving small businesses. But the most meaningful moment came when Jessica pulled me aside near the end of the evening. "Elena, I need you to know something. When I agreed to join Streamline Ops 2 years ago, I thought I was taking a job with an interesting startup. I didn't realize I was joining a mission that would change how I think about the relationship between technology and human potential." She paused, looking out at the party around us. These people aren't just customers. They're entrepreneurs whose dreams became reality because you saw a problem that needed solving and refused to accept that it couldn't be solved. We solved it together, I replied. No, you solved it. I helped execute your vision, but the vision was yours. And now that vision is going to scale to impact millions of people instead of hundreds. That's not just business success, that's legacy. 2 days later, Jessica and I boarded a flight to Seattle with 6 suitcases, 2 laptops, and a 3-year history of building something that had started as a favor for a friend and evolved into a technology platform that Amazon wanted to make central to their small business strategy. As the plane took off from JFK, I looked down at New York City shrinking below us and realized I wasn't just leaving a place, I was leaving a version of myself. The Elena Rodriguez who'd dropped out of graduate school to chase an impossible dream was becoming the Elena Rodriguez who'd proven that dream was not only possible, but valuable enough to change her life forever. The flight to Seattle was smooth, giving me 3 hours to process the magnitude of what was happening. In 2 days, I'd report to Amazon's headquarters as a senior executive. Jessica and I would have teams of engineers, access to massive datasets, and resources to scale Streamline Ops beyond anything we'd imagined during those early days in the WeWork space. But more than the professional transformation, I was moving toward a new understanding of what was possible when you trusted your vision enough to pursue it, despite skepticism from people who couldn't see what you were building. As the plane began its descent into Seattle, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to my father. "Papi, we're about to land. Tomorrow I start my new job. Thank you for raising me to see solutions where other people see problems." His response came immediately. "Mija, you've always been able to see the future better than the rest of us. Now go show them what Elena Rodriguez can do." Looking out the window at Seattle's skyline, with Amazon's headquarters visible in the distance, I realized that the girl who'd taken apart radios in her father's garage had grown into a woman who was about to help Amazon rethink how they served small businesses worldwide. The real work was just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room on the 23rd floor of Amazon's Day One building, looking out at the Seattle skyline while preparing for the most important presentation of my career. In 30 minutes, I would address Amazon's senior leadership team about the explosive growth of our integrated small business platform, but first I wanted to take a moment to appreciate how dramatically my life had changed. The numbers on the screen behind me told an incredible story. Streamline Ops, now fully integrated into Amazon's small business ecosystem, was serving 47,000 active customers across 38 states. Our AI-powered recommendations had helped small businesses increase their average revenue by 203% in the first 6 months of using the platform. Customer satisfaction scores were at 94%, and our retention rate was an unprecedented 97%. But beyond the metrics, what amazed me most was the human impact. I'd received over 3,000 personal thank you messages from business owners whose lives had been transformed by technology that had started as a solution for Maya's jewelry inventory problems. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, who was in the next building preparing her own presentation for the technical team. "Elena, I just got the preliminary Q2 numbers. We're going to hit our annual targets by July. This is insane." It was insane. And it was exactly what we'd hoped would happen when Amazon's resources met Streamline Ops' vision. The integration hadn't been without challenges. Learning to operate within Amazon's systems and processes had required significant adjustments from both Jessica and me. The scale was overwhelming at first. Instead of managing a team of 7 people, I was now leading a division of 43 engineers, data scientists, and business analysts. But Linda Foster and the leadership team had been true to their word about preserving the entrepreneurial culture that made Streamline Ops effective. They'd given me genuine autonomy to shape the platform's development, and more importantly, they'd embraced our customer-first philosophy that prioritized small business success over pure growth metrics. "Elena," David Chen had said during our 3-month review, "the reason this acquisition has been so successful is that you never lost sight of why you started Streamline Ops in the first place. You're not just scaling technology, you're scaling impact." The conference room door opened, and Linda Foster walked in, followed by Jeff Wilk, Amazon's CEO of Worldwide Consumer, and 5 other senior executives I'd learned to know over the past months. Elena, are you ready to blow our minds with small business success stories? Linda asked, settling into her chair with the kind of relaxed confidence that came from knowing the numbers were exceptional. I think you're going to be impressed, I replied, pulling up the first slide of my presentation. For the next 45 minutes, I walked them through case studies that illustrated not just what we'd accomplished, but why it mattered. There was Maria Santos, whose children's clothing business had grown from a local operation to an international brand selling in 14 countries. Roberto Silva, whose restaurant chain had expanded to 12 locations using our supply chain optimization tools. And Maya, whose jewelry company had become so successful that she'd hired 8 employees and was considering opening a physical storefront in Manhattan. But the story that really captures what we're accomplishing, I said, clicking to a new slide, is about Jennifer Walsh, the pet supply company owner who was initially concerned about losing personal service when Amazon acquired us. I showed them Jennifer's customer journey over the past 6 months. Her revenue had increased by 287%. Her inventory accuracy had improved to 99.2%, and she'd expanded from selling primarily dog products to serving customers with cats, birds, and even exotic pets. Last week, Jennifer sent me this message, I said, reading from the slide. Elena, I was wrong to worry about the acquisition. Streamline Ops hasn't just maintained its personal touch. It's given me access to insights and capabilities I never could have imagined. I'm not just running a business anymore. I'm building a company that can compete with anyone. Jeff Wilk leaned forward. Elena, these results are remarkable. But I want to understand something deeper. How has Amazon's platform enhanced what Streamline Ops was already doing? And what have you learned about serving small businesses at this scale? It was exactly the question I'd hoped he would ask. Jeff, when we were independent, Streamline Ops could analyze a business's individual sales patterns to make recommendations. Now, with Amazon's data and infrastructure, we can analyze economic trends, seasonal patterns, and market opportunities that individual businesses could never see on their own. I clicked to a slide showing a heat map of small business performance across different regions and industries. For example, we can predict that a craft brewery in Portland should start stocking summer seasonal ingredients in February based on weather patterns, tourism trends, and purchasing behavior from similar businesses across the Pacific Northwest. Or we can alert a boutique clothing retailer in Miami that geometric patterns are trending upward in their demographics 6 weeks before their competitors notice. The scale allows us to be proactive instead of reactive, I continued. We're not just helping businesses manage their current operations. We're helping them anticipate opportunities and challenges they wouldn't see coming otherwise. Linda Foster nodded approvingly. And what about the cultural integration? Has Amazon's environment enhanced or constrained your ability to serve customers the way you envision? It's enhanced it dramatically, I replied without hesitation. Amazon's customer obsession principle aligns perfectly with Streamline Ops' original mission. But more than that, working within Amazon has taught me that scale and personalization aren't mutually exclusive if you design systems properly. I shared examples of how we'd maintained personal relationships with customers while serving 47 times more businesses than we had as an independent company. Automated check-ins that felt genuinely personal, AI-powered support that addressed specific business challenges, and success managers who develop deep expertise in particular industries. What we've learned, I concluded, is that small businesses don't want to be treated like small businesses. They want access to the same sophisticated tools and insights that enterprise companies use, but delivered in a way that fits their scale and resources. The presentation concluded with our roadmap for the next 18 months: expansion into international markets, integration with Amazon's logistics network, and the development of predictive analytics that could help small businesses navigate economic uncertainty. As the executives filed out, discussing implementation timelines and budget allocations, Linda Foster stayed behind. Elena, I want you to know that this acquisition has exceeded every expectation we had. But more than the financial performance, what impresses me is how you've maintained the vision that made Streamline Ops special while embracing the possibilities that Amazon's platform creates. Thank you, Linda. I have to admit, 6 months ago, I was terrified that joining Amazon would mean losing the personal connection with customers that made our work meaningful. And now? Now I realize that meaningful work scales when you design it to scale. We're not helping hundreds of small businesses anymore, we're helping tens of thousands. And each one of those businesses represents someone's dream, someone's livelihood, someone's family. That afternoon, I had a video call scheduled with my parents. It had become a weekly tradition since moving to Seattle, and these calls had evolved into something much deeper than the casual check-ins they'd been when I lived in New York. "Micha," my father said as soon as the call connected, "I saw the article in Forbes about your platform helping small businesses weather the economic uncertainty. Is that your work they're writing about?" "It is, Poppy. We've been able to use Amazon's data to help small businesses prepare for market changes before they happen." My mother leaned into the camera frame. "Elena, we're so proud of you. But more than that, we're proud that you never gave up on helping people, even when we didn't understand what you were doing." It was a conversation that would have been impossible 3 years ago, when they saw my work as an impractical hobby rather than a meaningful career. Now they understood not just what I did, but why it mattered. "There's something I want to tell you both," I said. "Next month, Amazon is flying Maya, Roberto, and 12 other customers to Seattle for our first annual Small Business Success Summit. They want these entrepreneurs to share their stories with Amazon's leadership team." "That's wonderful," my mother said. "But why are you telling us?" "Because I want you to come too. I want you to meet the people whose lives have been changed by the platform I built. I want you to see why this work matters to me." My father's expression softened. "Elena, we would be honored to come." After the call ended, I walked to the window of my corner office, something I still couldn't quite believe I had, and looked out at Elliott Bay. The sun was setting behind the Olympic Mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of the string lights at family gatherings back in Queens. My phone buzzed with a message from Carlos. "Elena, I just saw that Forbes article Dad mentioned. I showed it to everyone at work. My little sister is changing the world." Then a text from Uncle Miguel. "Mija, I owe you a lifetime of apologies for doubting your computer business. You saw the future better than any of us." And finally, a message from Maya that made me smile. "Elena, I'm designing a special collection for your summit next month. It's called Dreams into Reality. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the impossible is just the difficult waiting for the right person to solve it." As I gathered my things to head home to the apartment Jessica and I shared in Capitol Hill, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 3.5 years ago, I'd been a graduate student struggling to convince my advisor that practical applications of AI were worth pursuing. 2 years ago, I'd been working alone in a shared workspace, desperately trying to prove that my vision could become a viable business. Now I was leading a team that was transforming how small businesses competed in the digital economy, with resources and reach that allowed us to impact thousands of entrepreneurs whose dreams might otherwise never have been realized. The girl who'd taken apart radios in her father's garage had grown into a woman who was helping small business owners take apart the barriers that prevented them from competing with larger companies. And tomorrow I would continue that work, supported by a family who finally understood what I'd been building and a company that had embraced the vision they'd initially dismissed. It wasn't just professional success. It was the fulfillment of a promise I'd made to myself when I'd first decided to leave graduate school and chase an impossible dream. The promise that technology could be a force for democratization, that innovation could serve the people who needed it most, and that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest solutions. Standing in my office as Seattle's skyline lit up for the evening, I realized that the most remarkable thing about this journey wasn't how much my life had changed. It was how clearly I could see that every challenge, every doubt, and every moment of uncertainty had been preparing me for exactly this moment. The future was full of possibilities I hadn't even begun to imagine. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.